The daily streams of the Hoeksteen Live. You're connected with our studio from where we bring you all the news that we got and what we think is most important of it. And we start off with watching at BBC World, which has Rolls-Royce breaks sales record as a news. And this is a man talking from Afghanistan.
Are they losing hope in the government?
They're losing. Every day they're losing hope.
Do you think this will strengthen the Taliban?
So, of course, when you have weak government, the Taliban is getting strong.
Everywhere people are talking about the failure to form a government. This man said he would take his vote back if he could. The barber didn't vote, but blamed worsening security on the failure of the government. And the man having a haircut said the economy was suffering because of the political failure. It's a hard time for those in the front line.
This force is now fighting the Taliban on its own, without US and other international support, and without the backing it really needs from a strong government.
And amid the political paralysis, the Afghan army is still taking heavy casualties in a war that's not stopped just because foreign forces have gone. David Loyne, BBC News, Kabul.
All right, there you have it with the BBC. We're going to turn the sound down and go to another video which we have here in our studio. And the first video we're going to show you comes from England. We're going to Buckingham Palace because Buckingham Palace denies all allegations surrounding Prince Andrew, who, as you might know, was mentioned in a sex scandal, including sex slave, minority girls in the USA and millionaires. Let's check out what they have on this.
Buckingham Palace has become very vocal, denying allegations in a federal lawsuit tying His Royal Highness Prince Andrew to sex crimes with underage minors. There is nothing to suggest this is true, a palace statement says. We have no record of such a meeting. The second son of Queen Elizabeth is not charged in the ongoing federal lawsuit, but it puts him right in the middle of an alleged sexual abuse ring from 1999 to 2002. That was allegedly run by international financier Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein pleaded guilty to solicitation of prostitution. In 2008, he was sentenced to 18 months behind bars. He served 13 months. Epstein was known to hobnob with the rich and famous, including Prince Andrew. When the two were spotted walking in Central Park in 2011 after Epstein had become a registered sex offender, the British press went crazy.
You're an embarrassment, sir. Prince Andrew, you're resigning.
His friendship cost Prince Andrew his job as the UK trade representative. Now the alleged victims are suing the US government, saying their rights had been violated in the Epstein plea deal. And at least one victim has named Prince Andrew by name. Jane Doe number 3 was forced to have sexual relations with this prince when she was a minor in 3 separate geographical locations, in London, New York, and on Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. According to the suit, young women were paid to come to Epstein's home in Florida to give him massages, where they were allegedly sexually assaulted. The defense says the girls lied about their ages and that there was never any sexual molestation. Prince Andrew has not been charged, but the allegations have led to 2 public denials from the royal family, including one that brazenly names the accuser. It is emphatically denied that HRH, the Duke of York, had any form of sexual contact or relationship with Virginia Roberts. The allegations made are false and without any foundation. The federal lawsuit also names high-profile criminal defense lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who calls the allegations unfounded.
She is a liar. She has charged Bill Clinton with having sex with her on the island when Secret Service records will obviously show he was never on the island. She claimed to meet the Queen.
You know, I mean, this is an incredible story. It's now an international story. And, of course, you've got Prince Andrew involved, Jeffrey Epstein, the American who allegedly was providing this girl to him, according to her, has pled guilty to soliciting sex from underage girls. He's a registered sex offender. What do you know about Virginia Roberts?
Well, you're right. It's all over the British networks, all of them. And we now see her because this is who the New York Post is saying is Ms. Roberts right here in today's edition of the New York Post.
And that's a picture of her with Prince Andrew.
That's right.
And then her today.
So it does show them together. But when you read this filing in the federal court in Florida, there are many more people that are named too. And it'll be very interesting to see where all this goes. And it's two separate suits. This is a federal suit because the alleged victims are saying, we didn't know about a plea deal and we should have been privy to all the conditions of it.
And this was the American side, which I was saying, what does the English news magazines make from this, the new English television? Here we have a report for you from England.
This is not a screen. This...
Connected to the conviction of US billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, friend of the prince. A woman has alleged in papers filed in Florida that she was forced to have sex with Andrew when she was 17, which is under the age of consent in the state. Well, Sky's Rhiannon Mills is here in the studio with us. Rhiannon, what do we know about these claims?
So, if we go into some detail, these allegations have appeared in some court documents that have effectively been filed in Florida. Now, they outline some claims which have been made by a young woman in relation to allegations against Jeffrey Epstein. Now, he's a wealthy American businessman who back in 2008 was actually jailed for admitting to soliciting to sex with an underage girl. And since that happened, a number of young women have come forward and also made similar allegations against him. Now, in this case, the young woman has come forward and said that Epstein effectively used her as a sex slave and would farm her out to many wealthy and influential men. Now, in one of the quotes from the document that we are still going through at the moment, it says, for instance, one such powerful individual that Epstein forced her to have sexual relationships with was a member of the British royal family, Prince Andrew, aka the Duke of York.
So what is Buckingham Palace saying? You say a strongly worded denial.
Yeah, it is. We've had this statement from Palace spokesperson. Now, in it, they say that this relates to a long-standing and ongoing civil proceedings in the United States to which the Duke of York is not a party. As such, we would not comment on the detail. However, for the avoidance of doubt, any suggestion of impropriety with underage minors is categorically untrue. And it is important to point out that this lawsuit that's currently being filed in America doesn't have anything specifically to do with Prince Andrew. It's not a lawsuit against him, and as a result, he hasn't publicly been able to come out and have any public denial, if you like. It is also important for us to say that Prince Andrew has in the past been criticised for spending time with Jeffrey Epstein. He has visited him in New York in the past, including in 2011 after Mr. Epstein was released from prison. But also we have to say that the Duke has denied any sexual contact with young women associated with Mr. Epstein, and also in the past has said that he knew nothing about these allegations against Mr. Epstein until they were made public.
Rhiannon, thanks very much. Rhiannon, thanks very
much. So much for the Prince Andrew scandal. If it will develop to be a scandal, it's very big in the English press. And now we're going to switch to something different, to something totally different, say, the struggle against ISIS. And as you might know, Iran has joined the struggle, the fight against ISIS. And Iran, the Shiites, will do anything to conquer and fight and win over ISIS, as this video from CNN shows.
Operation comes as U.S.-led coalition airstrikes are taking somewhat of a toll on the militant group. According to U.S. officials, ISIS is on the defense now. That's thanks to the air campaign by global partners and ground operations by Iraqi forces. Not everyone agrees with this. Of course, first and foremost, the Syrians. But let's get the take of the Iraqi ambassador to the United States, Lukman Faili. He joins me now live from Washington with more. Ambassador, thanks for being with us. We've been trying over the last several days to get some sort of official confirmation about whether or not the Iranians are bombing ISIS targets inside of Iraq. Is that happening?
There has been a clear, thank you for having me, first of all. There has been a clear statement by my Prime Minister and by the Iranian side that no such attacks has taken place.
Because we heard from the Pentagon, essentially, the spokesperson of the Pentagon, the reports are out there, and it wouldn't surprise us, essentially. So why would the Pentagon not be very clear about the fact that this has not happened?
Well, we are very clear in our denial.
What is the cooperation exactly against ISIS between Iran and Iraq? Does it involve, for instance, surveillance aircraft? There have been those reports.
What we have is Iraq is under attack by a transnational organization, ISIS, terrorist organizations, international cooperation taking place, including the Iranian. We have borders with Iranian. We have national interest, both sharing in relation to that threat. We are cooperating in various military advisors and others, but there are no Iranian boots on the ground, nor there are Iranian flights over Iraqi airspace.
So no flights over Iraqi airspace, no boots on the ground, but perhaps then intelligence cooperation?
The Iraqis are having that fight. They are spearheading that fight. The United States and others are cooperating with us. The Iranian are our partners in this fight. They have a threat. We share that threat. And they appreciate the urgency we have, and they have been very supportive. We appreciate that. Let's not forget that we have a large border sharing, and as a result, we are cooperating with each other in whatever way we can within the Constitution and within the international norms.
What can you tell us? Because Iraqi officials did make statements about this woman who was arrested in Lebanon, that she was a wife of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And some Iraqi officials came out 24 hours or so later saying, that's not true at all. We can identify her. She is not a wife of Baghdadi. Do you have any information about that?
I don't have anything more than what I have with some spokesmen from our government have said. There has been conflicting reports about it, so to be honest, I would not have so much on it.
Let me ask you first then about, lastly I should say, about ISIS and about how there has been accusations that the government, first of Nouri al-Maliki, and there are hopes placed in your current Prime Minister now, al-Obeidi, that the process would be more inclusive of Sunnis and therefore would make them feel more part of the governing executive in Baghdad. What efforts are being done to make sure that's the case?
There is a sense of urgency across all the political entities in Iraq. The Prime Minister is leading that process. And only last week we have come to a strategic agreement with the Kurds in relation to next year's budget. We have had strong cooperations with some of the tribes, Sunni tribes in Anbar and in Mosul, around in the Nainawa province. We also had all the right appointments at the highest level, including the Defense Minister and others. So I think there is a sense of cooperation, there is a sense of appreciating each other's need, and I think that's all in the right direction. The government is taking all the right steps. The United States is reflecting of that as well, only last week in Brussels.
But Ambassador, is it perhaps a little too late now to include the Sunnis after ISIS has basically gained so much ground that practically the entire Anbar province is under their control?
We cannot coexist with ISIS, so nothing is too late. We always may have that opportunity lost, but that doesn't mean that we cannot refocus. Everybody's fight is against ISIS. It's an existential threat to the integrity of the state. So in that sense, we cannot let our eyes off that ball. We need to focus on it. And that's what we have now. And I think the cooperation and the reflection we're hearing from international partners is appraising what we have taken, and what we have done.
Ambassador Lukman Faili, thank you very much. The Iraqi ambassador to Washington. Thank you very much for joining us on CNN.
Thank you for having me.
And there you have it, a coalition between Iran and Iraq and the Kurds. As you might remember, it was not too long ago that Iran and Iraq had a very bloody war against each other, but now they have a common enemy, the ISIS, together with the Kurds. So you see, the coalitions shift in this region all the time. This is the way it is these days, and it might change in the future. You never know. And now we're going to try to bring you the news from another part of the world, from Europe, but also news related to Islam. Because in Germany there's a movement called Pegida, which was firstly long time denied by the mainstream media, but now is gaining ground also in the mainstream media. Also protest from the government against this movement, Pegida. And
West. More and more people in the eastern city of Dresden have flocked to join Monday rallies. Just before Christmas, they numbered more than 17,000. Pegida founder Lutz Bachmann has attracted support from some on the far right as well as ordinary Germans alarmed by a rise in refugee arrivals.
Deutschland ist kein Zuwanderungsland.
Lutz said, Germany is not a land of immigration. Integration does not mean living side by side, but together on the basis of the Judeo-Christian merits of our constitution and our German culture with its Christian Jewish roots, determined by humanism and enlightenment. Lutz says he started the movement because he was disgusted by Kurds in Germany demonstrating against the war in Syria and clashing with Salafist opponents. Pegida accuses the German government of fostering immigration policies that are not conservative enough. Flag wavers shout slogans calling asylum seekers criminals. Critics of Pegida condemn it as a call to arms by far-right populists. A poll by German public service television found a large majority of Germans harbor negative attitudes towards immigrants. This anti-immigrant protester says, look at asylum seekers' homes, men only. They are criminals who left their families behind in the war. Asylum seekers' first choice destination in Europe, Germany took in 200,000 refugees in 2014, which was 60% more than the year before. News magazine Stern found 29% of people thought Islamic influence in Germany justified the Pegida marches. In a New Year speech, Chancellor Angela Merkel stood up for openness towards victims of conflicts and crises. Don't follow those calls of prejudice, cold and hatred, she said, addressing the demonstrators. In a counter-protest, including many Christians voicing support for asylum seekers, the Catholic authorities in Cologne turned out the floodlights that normally bathe the landmark cathedral as a warning not to let darkness take over.
And from the darkness of Cologne and the demonstrations in Germany, we go back to Iraq and we will see how the US troops are doing down there in Iraq. Because as you might know, Iraq is still a war zone. There's still fighting going on between several factions of all parties. And whenever will it end? The Americans are still there more or less and they're taking fire. I wait if we can get the video online. Are we working there already? Play it, please.
CNN American troops in Iraq now are coming under regular fire from ISIS forces. This, according to the Pentagon, it's happening at the Al-Assad air base in the Anbar province. That's in western Iraq. Let's bring in our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. Barbara, I take it U.S. forces now, they're in greater danger as a result of these strikes that are going at this Al-Assad air base. Is that right?
Wolf, this is the big concern now at Al-Assad. It's a sprawling, huge base in western Iraq, but ISIS knows that there are U.S. troops there. 300 are not precise. The Pentagon's official word is that the attacks are, quote, completely ineffective. But nonetheless, there is growing concern because it's happening on a regular basis. There are 320 U.S. troops there. Not saying at this point whether it has changed security measures there. The troops that are there, 320 U.S. troops, they are conducting training, advising, assisting for Iraqi forces, trying to get them back in the fight. But the concern, of course, is that the fight doesn't come to the doorstep of those U.S. forces. President Obama vowing that U.S. forces will not be in a combat role. The concern about these attacks, these rocket and mortar attacks by ISIS, is that combat could come to the U.S. forces. Wolf?
Well, I assume there is a contingency plan to evacuate those 320 U.S. troops if necessary.
Absolutely. There are what the military calls quick reaction forces all across that region, ready to move in if any of the U.S. troops at any of the points in Iraq, from Baghdad to Anbar province to this al-Assad base, another base, Taji base, 170 U.S. troops there, U.S. troops in Erbil. There's more than 2,000 U.S. troops across Iraq now. There are contingency plans if they do come under fire, and it cannot be dealt with to get them out of there. But remember, there are a number of U.S. Apache helicopters there. These helicopter gunships are able to move in very closely, push insurgents back if they get too close. That did happen on one occasion in Erbil. We are told the insurgents have not come that close again. But the fact is, the bottom line is that these attacks by insurgents are now happening on a regular basis where several hundred U.S. troops are located.
And there you have it. The situation for the remaining troops of the United States in Iraq are difficult. And as you know, the war in Iraq is partly also on the American side a war of technology. And as you know, military technology always will develop into public technology. Where would the internet be without the military inventing it back in the 50s? We were not watching now internet, all of us. And then we go back to the United States, we go to Las Vegas, the gambling capital of the world, where at this moment is taking place a huge fair of technology. And there, one of the questions that we're going to aim ourselves on is there life beyond the smartphone? And on this big thing there in Las Vegas, Nevada, USA, there was a sort of a question, a sort of an answer on that question, and we're going to watch it right now. Oh, we may be going to watch it right now. Yes, there it comes.
I'm reporting here from the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, the biggest annual convention for the technology industry, where we're seeing two interesting trends emerge. The first of which is what we can call the fragmentation of innovation. For the past decade, the industry has been focused on developing a relatively small number of devices, laptops, smartphones, tablets. But now that's changing, and a much wider variety of devices is now coming to market. Things like wearables for your wrist and face, things like Internet of Things that can connect your home lock to the internet, as well as even things like a baby onesie that can send your baby's temperature to an app on your smartphone. That's an interesting challenge for the industry because it's not really clear yet what consumers are actually going to want to buy. The second interesting trend that we're seeing is the rising purchasing power of emerging market consumers, who now account for about half of global technology spending, led of course by China, according to the Consumer Electronics Association. That's an opportunity for new players like Xiaomi, the Chinese smartphone company, but it's a big challenge for established players like Apple and Samsung, who have to figure out how to cater to consumers who generally want cheaper devices and, of course, have different needs and wants. It's something to keep an eye out for in the next coming years, and, of course, the keynote speakers at CES in 10 years might be quite different than the ones today. Sarah Mishkin for the Financial Times in Las Vegas.
And that makes it time for the most important news of this day, the weather report. And as you know, the weather is very important, especially to us because it's a little bit cold outside, but it's clear skies. And the weather also has a big impact on industry and on agriculture. For instance, for the marshmallows crop in North Carolina. Watch this video.
From a distance, this orchard looks healthy and productive. But up close, you can see that North Carolina's marshmallow crops are in trouble. The problem? Water. Too much of it.
They have a critical range of moisture, and you get above it, they get laden with it, and then you get early drop. These are fruit-bearing trees here. Marshmallows are tree fruit. And when you get this water in them, they drop off down into the ground, and that's it. You can't harvest them.
But how's it really affected him? It's the third straight year that grower Ben Yoken will not take any marshmallows to market. He knows that growing the cash crop is a gamble, a lost bet that may have cost him his farm.
Marshmallows are a difficult crop. There's really no doubt about that. We planted 275 acres of trees, but it takes 4 years from the time that you get the tree planted before you're going to get your first kind of a harvest out of it at all. So you got to figure 8 or 9 years before you start to make any money back from it at all. And we were hoping to make about $3.5 million if we could run this orchard at full capacity, but the way it looks now, I'm not even going to be able to keep up the loan on the tractor.
The situation has officials in Raleigh worried, and despite the best efforts in research by but the economic news from the crop's failure is even more bitter.
Ben's not alone. This is going to be a $40 million loss statewide. All the marshmallow producers are in trouble this year. The government might can come through with some low-interest loans or some form of subsidy.
But one thing is certain. Marshmallow growers are proud people, and they won't attempt to market a product that has been tainted by the elements.
Well, the problem mostly is quality. You look at the little ones here. They're stunted by all the rain. They're never going to sell. The large ones, they got mellow mold on them. They're slimy. And they're bitter. They're not going to sell.
I guess most of us haven't thought about North Carolina's troubled marshmallow industry lately. I know that I haven't. To most of us, a marshmallow is nothing more than just a luxury item. But to growers like Ben Yoakum, they're much, much more than that. They're a way of life. Bill Coy, Channel 9 Eyewitness News, Iredell County.
There you have it, dear viewers. Marshmallows are a difficult crop. And the economy in North Carolina, around the world, is also a different thing. And life is also very difficult. And life is full of problems. And with this optimistic message, we leave you with the streams of the Hoeksteen Life for this day, today, January 6th, the day that we call in Dutch, in Holland, de Koningendag. What would you call it in English, Raoul?